The mysteries of what the unknown is in Over the Garden Wall can vary, depending on who you ask, I think. Is it sort of a limbo realm, like an in-between veil, a place between life and death? Can it be compared to Dante's Inferno, as some people like to do, as they go through a strange purgatory journey? And what sort of messages does the show really give us? There are so many themes, ideas, and theories in the entire show. Some are dark, while others are heartfelt. There are depressing times shared with pleasant memories. Was the journey of Wirt and Greg considered a real journey for them? And perhaps the line of "the loveliest lies of all" can be more important than at first glance. Dreams, unconsciousness, and everything in between can be stranger than fiction. In this final episode, I'll be going through as many theories as I could find, and some that I maybe have thought of myself, I'm not sure. But now that we've gone through an entire deep dive series, you can kind of understand the depth of each episode, from the music to the writing to the development of characters. The theories won't really follow a certain timeline either, as most kind of jump around the story with reoccurring themes. So I'll begin with the odd appearances of the black turtles and what they can possibly represent.
So we came here to burgle your turts.
Wirt and Greg stumble upon these turtles a few times, like in the old grist mill or inside Ani Whisper's house. The turtles aren't really harmful when they're, scuttling about, but in the first episode we see that the regular dog was possessed, I would say, and transformed into the ferocious black wolf dog, that attacks Wirt and Greg mercilessly because of one of the black turtles that's lodged inside of it. So are these turtles really evil spirits? Well, from the words of Patrick McHale, I consider the creator of the show, he says that they are imperfections of the quilt, meaning that they were left in the show for others to speculate about and their purposes. So from my first perspective, I think that the turtles are corrupted spirits that are made dark by the beast. Since they're mostly seen where Edelwood trees grow, it makes sense that the turtles are connected spiritually with those who are lost along the way and ensnared by the lure of the beast's false hope.
Anything is possible if you set your mind to it, right?
But, hey, don't get my words kind of twisted or wrong here. I'm not saying that the turtles are directly followers or servants of the beast, but rather they were turned dark because of the beast's influence of twisting things that were once good into something obscure. Additionally, what is the task of Ani Whispers, with so many of those turtles in the big baskets in the house? And how is she able to literally, eat them right up and, toss them aside like nothing?
Then no one shall be devoured alive tonight.
I think that when Ani Whispers goes out into the forest, when she's gone, she's there to collect these turtles so that they don't really corrupt anything else. Since her sister Adelaide is basically, I think, is a witch, I wonder if Ani Whispers might have been one before, but she turned to kind of the lighter side of healing and, correcting the wrongs, while Adelaide kind of lost her way and shifted to trickery and the darker side of witchcraft. So with this extraordinary skill and basically unusual trait, Ani Whispers is able to rid these evil spirits from at least, moving around or, going elsewhere, basically just straight up by eating them. Of course, she also has the difficult task of making sure that Lorna doesn't capture any other unwilling visitors. And that kind of brings me into the next theory of what other kinds of evil forces are kind of at work in the unknown. So we know that Lorna is possessed by another evil spirit, but one that really isn't connected to the beast, since Lorna doesn't really mention the beast, even after she's cleansed at the end of the episode. Ani Whispers attempts to keep other spirits at bay from the power of her magical bell.
The ringing of the bell commands you.
It makes me wonder that, if there is a power of spiritualism in the world of the unknown. After all, as mentioned before, both Adelaide and Ani Whispers might have dabbled into witchcraft, but, what are they fighting against, or what are they following? Adelaide takes the side of the beast, the beating of eternal darkness, things like that.
I do as he commands, the voice of the night, the beast of eternal darkness.
Perhaps the beast in his many dark ways had put a spell on her to capture unwilling visitors and, drain their essence, slowly turning them into Edelwood spirits by the slow decay of time. So then, what happens when spirits turn into these Edelwood trees or succumb to the power of the beast? That I think there's a few more theories that kind of come into mind, including the comparisons of this, limbo or in-between realm, the strange effects of what the Beast Lantern is all about, and how the inhabitants in the unknown are stuck in this never-ending land of shadow and mist. So we'll start with this peculiar item of the Beast Lantern. Held mostly by the woodsman, this red lantern holds the spiritual essence of the beast himself. Of course, since the beast is the ultimate deceiver of the unknown, and he has supernatural traits beyond understanding, he's able to trick the woodsman into thinking his daughter's soul is inside.
But be sure to keep it lit, or your daughter's flame will go out.
But because of this, the woodsman holds on to this lantern with dear life, constantly protecting it. But what happens when the lantern is finally snuffed out, and the flame of the beast's soul is extinguished? Does that mean that his hold on the forest just goes away? The finale of the show lets us see Wirt and Craig returning to the regular world, Beatrice getting to be reshaped and joining her human family, and the woodsman seeing his daughter again. Additionally, all the people from the introduction of the show seem to be content with where they are and who they're with, when all is kind of said and done. So, does that mean that the beast has sort of possession and dark hold on the entirety of the forest in the unknown?
There is only me. There is only my way. There is only the forest, and there is only surrender.
Personally, I think that the beast was the darkest and most dangerous evil entity that haunted the forest of the unknown, and without his hold, the spirits that were trapped there were able to escape, even if it was just, a small moment there. When the beast's soul was sent into oblivion, once the lantern's light was blown out, and the forest was still plagued with darkness, but those individuals who were directly tied with the beast were released from his grip. The forest itself, I think, is a sort of in-between realm itself, where those who were trapped there needed to prove themselves, either their worth or their skill that's needed to escape. When the realm's darkest force is gone, I would assume that many other lost spirits became confused and are kind of still stuck in the forest. So basically, the unknown here is a place that never really disappears, but there are corrupted spirits that can take a hold on the realm and also a hold on other trapped, confused spirits. So let's talk about the beast's hold on all the inhabitants in the unknown and the power of the mysterious purgatory realm, if you could consider that a purgatory realm. Almost everyone in the unknown seems to fear the beast and his terrible hold in the misty forest.
It's the beast.
Oh, you guys have heard of the beast too?
Hiding in the shadows, the beast never shows his true form until it's forcibly seen by the woodsman at the end. His hold on the inhabitants can correlate to his true form, one that's wooden in appearance with multiple faces carved inside, those that are permanently and ominously carved into the wooden skin. This makes me wonder too if the beast is truly just a spirit, jumping from host to host, or if this wooden figure was his spirit, made of multiple unfortunate souls. We get to see the fear of the beast mostly with the residents of the Dark Lantern. Not only do we hear from them directly, but we hear the beast's operatic song while the woodsman chops trees in the rainy forest. The threat of his power grows immensely after this episode, but I think that each of the characters that Wirt, Greg, and Beatrice meet have seen the beast and are aware of what he can do. They're all stuck under his spell, or rather his curse. It's a test to see if people can overcome their own personal darkness in the end. Those who are stuck in the unknown are still stuck in their personal struggles, the ones that they cannot overcome. Ultimately, Wirt defeats the beast because he grows as his own personal hero, not as a physical one, but a hero that defeats the timid heart of himself.
Here, woodsman. I've got my own problems to take care of. This one's yours.
Facing one's fear is the biggest obstacle to overcome in the unknown and the key element to defeating the beast. We see Wirt overcoming his own fears and getting past his low self-esteem, which makes him the perfect individual to face the beast and reveal the truth to everyone. So when Wirt and the woodsman, with the woodsman blowing out the flame of the beast's soul in the end, defeat the ruler of the unknown, the people of the realm seem to go back to their once regular lives, or, so it seems.
No, woodsman!
So, along with my deep dive series, I highlighted the importance of timeline in the settings of various episodes. This ties in well with how the defeat of the beast showcases the many people across different times are stuck kind of under that same curse. The woodsman is reunited with his daughter. Miss Langtry and Jimmy Brown are watching the circus together. Lorna and Ani Whispers are having tea together, and the old grist mill sits alone in the forested silence. But when it pans over to the Husk and Bee settlements, they're, basically all piles of bones and skeletons around the maypole, where Enoch's fabric head is torn at the top by the small black cat. Now, of course, Enoch and the citizens of the town are pretty much well aware that, everyone in the town is dead. Hence the confusion with the pumpkin lady, saying to Wirt that they are too early for them, and they don't really belong there, and how people don't tend to pass through Pottsfield.
Say, aren't you a little too early?
What do you mean?
I mean, it doesn't seem like you're ready to join us just yet.
Join you? Yeah, no, I'm just passing through.
Folks don't tend to pass through Pottsfield.
Aside from Pottsfield, there's a well-known brief frame of when Wirt and Greg are hiding behind a tombstone in the 9th episode, where the name of it reads Quincy Endicott. In the conclusion of the show, we see that Quincy and Fred the horse are actually painted on a massive portrait in Marguerite Gray's mansion as she looks at it by herself. Does this mean that Quincy had already passed, along with Fred? The mystery of death is quite abundant in the show, with some of these examples scattered, kind of here and there. I really do think that Wirt and Greg traveled through this, in-between realm, meeting people who were either stuck in the realm, or actually wandering spirits who had passed on many years ago. The blend of this makes the unknown all the more interesting.
Beware the unknown!
It makes me wonder, too, that if, Quincy Endicott died and was buried in the same town that Wirt and Greg live in, does that make their town, more sensitive to the supernatural? And, just to be fun with it, I can kind of imagine Wirt doing some research, if he ever found Quincy's headstone, perhaps he and Greg could have found the actual mansion that Quincy and Marguerite had, tucked away on the edges of the city or, something like that. It's just kind of a fun idea to think about. So tagging along with the concept of the afterlife in the show, there are, kind of other examples to it as well. One of them is the episode of Babes in the Woods, where Greg's spectral body is led up to the clouds with cherubs and Onoroi, the figures that I had mentioned in the last episode, actually.
Huh? Whoa!
These were the ancient Greek entities that inhabit the realm of dreams and deliver messages, visions, and even prophecies to mortals. Initially when I first watched this episode, I thought, all these figures in the Cloud City had, died sometime in the past or something like that, as sad as that sounds, because most of them are either kids or animals. But when I'm thinking about it now, it could have just been in another separate realm, that Greg was momentarily dragged into. And that kind of goes into my next theory, that the unknown has what we called multiverses, I guess you could say. Because, I know that some of us are, tired of hearing the concept or theory about the multiverse, but this one regarding the unknown is at least, a little interesting. So the multiverse of the unknown spans across various timelines, as I mentioned before, as each episode is practically a different time period. My theory is that whatever hold the beast has on the inhabitants of the unknown doesn't really matter at the time of when these people were stuck here. So along the theme that the unknown is a limbo realm, it's also a holding place for wandering spirits, both dead or unstuck or stuck unconsciously in this realm, like Wirt and Greg are for a while. We get to see the happy endings, I guess you could say, of each of the characters that Wirt and Greg meet, each of them sticking to their distinct time periods. When the hold of the beast is over, they resume their lives, able to see the happiness in their lives and continue on, or the spirits are remembered for those who have truly passed on, like Quincy Endicott or the Pumpkin Pilgrims. So now I came across another theory that's actually kind of dark, like I said before, but I'm including it anyway because it makes a little bit of sense, at least for me, so... At the very end of the show, we see that Greg's frog still has Ani Whisper's magic bell inside of it, lighting up to the amazement of Wirt's friends.
You can listen to
And so the story is complete, and everyone is satisfied with the ending.
So there's a theory that since Wirt and Greg tumbled into a frozen pond in the cold month of October, Wirt had barely survived the accident, being dragged out of the pond and ending up weekly in a hospital. However, the fate of Greg wasn't as fortunate. This theory actually has Greg passing away because of the frozen pond, and most likely because of his young age, succumbing to the brutal temperatures quicker than Wirt. Later, when Wirt wakes up in the hospital, he looks over to see Greg dancing around happily with his frog, having that magical bell. This indicates that Wirt is either hallucinating the image of Greg, wishing so much that Greg had survived, or that he's still stuck dreaming as he's under, heavy medicines to, keep him alive, basically. After all, we do only see Wirt moving on his own accord when he pulls himself and Greg up to the surface in the last episode. Lastly, to add to this theory, the song lyrics of "The Loveliest Lies of All" can possibly mean everything was just some sort of strange dream for Wirt when he was unconscious in the frozen pond.
The loveliest lies of all.
The last episode I made for the series, I actually made a comment that "The Loveliest Lies of All" showcases a sense of, that dreamy wonder. So it could a little bit fit into this theory, almost a little too well, but, hey, let me know your thoughts on this theory, or any of them, for that matter. So I've got a few more theories to cover, some that kind of jump around here and there, but, it's still more topics and ideas to talk about. The next one that I have in mind is a small one, which, covers the black cat that dances around and lives happily with the pumpkin pilgrims. Obviously, Enoch governs the people of Pottsfield and is basically like the voice of the townsfolk, representing his protection and humble love for them all. But inside the balloon-like head of Enoch at the end of the show, we see that the black cat pops its head out of it. Does this mean that the cat is still there among the dead, even after the beast is defeated? There's some thought that, cats can sense, spirits and the undead and, the paranormal fields and stuff like that, so maybe it's similar to that. Another wild thought that I had when I kind of, thought about that paranormal stuff is that, this cat, basically surrounding this, was what if the cat is actually Enoch? So I know it's a little wild here, but, what if the cat is actually Enoch? Speaking to his people who are actually dead, lingering around as spirits. The cat being a sentient animal like Greg's frog or, Fred the talking horse, has much more psychic powers than the regular individuals of the unknown. We see that the cat dancing with the pumpkin pilgrims when Wirt and Greg enter the barn, but aside from that, we don't really see the cat too often. We see him, driving the cart with the turkeys and stuff, so he knows how to do things, and I'm maybe it's just kind of wild. But maybe he hid inside of Enoch's head and then began to talk menacingly to Wirt and Greg and stuff like that.
Now let me get this straight. You come to our town, you trample our crops, you interrupt our private engagement. Now you want to leave.
Again, this is kind of like more of a wild theory, but it's interesting to think about. So, another theory that came to mind one day was a bit of a stretch, but hey, it's one that's fun to entertain. So, this one is that each episode is a memory or a peek into a specific character's life and those who are around them that meant something significant to them. For example, there are certain characters that stand out in each episode that Wirt and Greg must interact with in order to progress through their journey. The first episode, they learn about the woodsman in a, somewhat vague backstory, but, still a little is more than nothing. So, Wirt and Greg get a small glimpse as to why the woodsman is there. In the second episode, they meet Enoch and his people of skeletons, whom he loves and cherishes. Wirt and Greg interact with Enoch and ultimately move past Pottsfield because they agree to Enoch's decree. In the third episode, it's mostly Wirt interacting with Miss Langtree, but, with Greg's help, they end up saving the school at the end of the day, if one can call it a day, much to the delight of Miss Langtry, along with the bliss of her reuniting with Jimmy Brown. The fourth episode, though there are many characters in it, belongs to the tavern keeper, I think, whose memory can, most likely recall all the visitors inside at the present time. She is well aware of the dangers outside and keeps an eye out on all the inhabitants close to her. In the fifth episode, though it might be a stretch, it can be divided into two parts, one being focusing on the constable frog of the ship, chasing down the stowaways only to be surprised at their performances, and secondly to Adelaide, who was tricked by the very servant Beatrice, sent to capture Wirt and Greg. In the sixth episode, it centers around Quincy Endicott and his memories of being a wealthy nobleman. Even though we see his headstone later in the show, this theory highlights the possibility of his spirit remembering the good times when his company was complete, and his, basically him soaking in all that wealth. In the seventh episode, I think it focuses more on Lorna instead of on Whispers, since we see the transformation of her into the possessed form, but also the cleansing of the evil spirit and the release of it through the actions of Wirt. Lastly, in the eighth episode, it does definitely follow Greg, but perhaps it's through the lens of the Queen of the Clouds, watching Greg save her city and allowing him a wish because of it. Now, the ninth episode is basically the reason why Wirt and Greg enter the unknown, and the last 10th episode is basically the finale of everything. So it's kind of where this theory falls short, or kind of has some issues with it. But, like I said, it's kind of like more of a fun theory to follow through, whether it's accurate or not. Each episode focusing on one specific, prominent figure that moves the story along and also has some importance to the unknown and maybe possibly some ties to the beast. So.
Yes, all hope will soon be lost.
The second to last theory, here we go, is kind of going back to the curious item of the beast lantern. So I know that we kind of talked about it before, but we're kind of doing a repeat and kind of extending on that because, yeah, it's very interesting and almost vague, but,
I can put his spirit in the lantern. As long as the flame stays lit, he will live on inside.
Wirt is able to overcome his fear of the beast in the last episode, realizing that the true spirit inside the lantern is actually the beast, and lets the woodsman make the final move on the villain. So, does this mean that the lantern has some sort of magical effect to it? Like some other ones, like Ani Whisper's magical bell. There's a moment in the fourth episode when Wirt kicks away the lantern from the woodsman, where the flame inside sets the woods on fire, sending the woodsman into a shocked panic, and rightfully so. So then why didn't the spirit of the beast be released and, defeated right then and there? At first I had that exact question when I rewatched it for, however many, how many times I've rewatched it. But when it kind of occurred to me that the beast survives on Edelwood trees, pretty much, past spirits who were deceived by the beast and turned into a gradual sacrifice, I guess.
Why, I've given you another Edelwood. He will burn nicely in the lantern.
When the lantern is knocked away, the woods are set on fire, but with Edel trees nearby, perhaps the spirit of the beast fed on those flames and jumped back into the lantern before it was too late for anyone else to see. But it still kind of makes me wonder that if this lantern has a magical effect to it, keeping a spirit inside of it, being so fragile that, just a simple blow of a candle can erase the existence of whatever is inside of it.
Are you?
Don't!
It definitely makes sense that the beast kept on hounding the woodsman to take care of it, if we're kind of following through this theory. And so finally, for the last theory, and again, it might be another really random and wild one at it, we'll see. Is it possible to say that Greg's frog was the entry point into the unknown, the key figure that allowed this strange magic for unique characters to enter the realm? There's a few traits that kind of point to this one. The first is that he's not really an ordinary frog, as he walks or stands on two legs occasionally, but still hops like a regular frog from time to time. Obviously, the frogs in Chapter 6, also stand up, so maybe it's just the realm of the unknown that makes them like that, instead of in reality where all they do is hop. But if that's true, then how did Greg's frog end up in this, regular realm, if you could say that? And, did he somehow escape from the unknown and was suddenly shifted to a regular frog until Greg picked him up? Or, I'm not sure. Questions that, maybe you guys can answer. Another trait that follows this theory is that the frog can sing very well.
At night, when the lake is a mirror, and the moon rides the waves to the shore.
Instead of, garbling or mumbling like the other frogs in the 6th episode that we see. Though he doesn't talk basically at all, he can still sing, which is, I guess you could say, unusual. After this episode, the frog never talks or sings again, so that's kind of odd as well. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the frog still has Ani Whisper's magic bell at the end of the show. And perhaps this is why the frog was able to cross through the realm of the unknown and back to the regular realm with the help of Wirt and Greg. After all, Wirt and Greg escape the frozen pond suddenly when they defeat the beast.
Trees, 3 is the wind in the leaves.
But, we don't really see how they're transported, so it may be a far stretch, but perhaps it's because of Ani Whisper's magic bell mixed with the odd nature of Greg's frog that they were all able to return back from where they came from. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, it might have just been that, once the beast is defeated and his hold is no longer with him, that they automatically get sent back to their home, whether it's Wirt and Greg or the other characters that they've met, as we see that all the other characters that they meet along the way have their own version of a happy ending, so to speak. And that's kind of all the theories and final thoughts that I have that I'm including in my deep dive series. And it might not be as long as I thought it would be, but it's all the ones that I could really think about. So I do have other projects regarding the show, but I just kind of wanted to give a long layout of my personal thoughts. So I hope that you've enjoyed it. Not a lot of episodes, but it's only one show, one season. It's only like an hour long, so you can only do so much to it. But if you'd like to add anything else, or if I've forgotten anything about any other theories, just let me know, because I'd definitely like to know. Over the Garden Wall is such a phenomenal show, despite its short length. But perhaps that's kind of like what makes it so great, I guess. That there's so much more to the unknown that we can speculate on and guess and think about. Thankfully, most of the fans of this show are humble and kind, and can celebrate common interests and share the love that we have for this very special show, the one that we all watch year after year and still get that same warming embrace of lost nostalgia. There you go. I could barely finish that last episode, that last sentence. See, there you go. But yeah, that's kind of everything that I have for this deep dive series. It's kind of strange to really finish the deep dive series so suddenly, but I guess that kind of makes sense, and it's kind of in line as to what the unknown really is. It just kind of like ends abruptly with Wirt and Greg defeating the beast at the very end, and it's just like, that's it, that's that. I forget like the lines that the narrator says later on. He's like, and that's the end, and so on and so forth, and yet over the garden wall, who knows what still lies there. But yeah, just let me know your guys' thoughts on any of the theories. Again, like what I said, if I did miss any of the theories or some thoughts that you guys might have had, or some disagreements, let me know. But it's kind of just things that I found or thought of. It doesn't have to be correct, doesn't have to be accurate. It's just things that are fun to follow, or theories that makes you think. There's so many characters that can go into just speculating on their own history depending on the timeline and who is the beast, who really is the beast, who knows, maybe he was some sort of corrupted spirit from the beginning of time or something. Some theories that are very wild and out there, but that's just the way it is. That's the way that Patrick McHale made this show. Is there's a lot of open-ended questions that we might not know the answers to, and that's what's incredible. Every time I rewatch it, or every time that I listen to things about this show, that makes me think, it's just like, wow, it's crazy. One show, one season, and it's still, it still amazes me to this day. So, but I think that's kind of everything that I have for this. I hope you guys all enjoyed the deep dive series that I've made for this. Hopefully you guys have also watched, or I should say listened to, the audiobook that I made. It's literally just called Over the Garden Wall, Novelized and Narrated. This whole deep dive series began with that novelization, and basically since then it's piqued my interest of going, full deep dive into it, and that's why this series was created. So I do definitely have more singular projects here and there that I'll include, probably not too often, but it'll definitely be there as more of just kind of like a filler part of the playlist, just to let others know that, hey, I still love Over the Garden Wall no matter what year it is. Just like so many of us. So yeah, and hopefully this is going to be posted after my live stream of me narrating. Hopefully that went well, but we'll see. But yeah, other than that, that's kind of all I have. I don't have anything else to say, so just stay tuned for another episode whenever that might be. And yeah, we'll just continue to see what else the unknown has in store for us. Thank you for watching, and farewell.
The loveliest of all.